The alleged perpetrators of the railway sabotage in Poland 2 weeks ago were able to enter and leave Poland by bus unhindered through an official border crossing and using their authentic passports. They did so even though one of them had already been convicted of sabotage in Ukraine on behalf of the Russian secret services. They arrived, did their business and, undisturbed by any Polish services, calmly returned to Belarus. In just one night, these saboteurs working for the Russian GRU discredited the Polish services. This shows the weakness of the Polish state and its lack of concern for its citizens. The attacks we have seen recently, acts of sabotage, will continue to happen as long as we have an open border to the east. How is this possible? It turns out that after almost 4 years of war beyond our eastern border, Poland still does not have a system for exchanging information with Ukraine. For so many years, both the current government and, unfortunately, the previous one have been unable to sign appropriate agreements with Ukraine on the exchange of information that would protect against the influx of dangerous individuals. These events took place 2 weeks ago. Several acts of sabotage took place on the Warsaw-Lublin railway line leading onwards into Ukraine. The most serious, involving the use of explosives, could have caused a catastrophe and the death of hundreds of Polish railway passengers. The perpetrators were identified but not caught. Both Yevgeny and Alexander K. entered and left Poland by bus on the basis of genuine documents, that is, using their real identities. At a time of hybrid war being waged against Poland, the Polish authorities actually allowed saboteurs working for the enemy to enter and leave the country. This was admitted today by Marcin Kierwiński, Minister of Internal Affairs and Administration. And do you already know how these people entered the country and whether they entered on their own passports and left Poland on their own passports? Everything points to that. For the sake of the investigation, I will answer yes. Everything points to that. We will talk. We are already talking to the Ukrainian side so that the situation where someone who is convicted of sabotage there and is not marked in international systems never happens again. In my opinion, this is a huge oversight on the part of the secret services, because it cannot be the case that we do not know that such people, who are clearly members of the Russian secret services, are entering our country. They should not be allowed to cross our border, or they should simply be detained. That's not all. The identity of one of the saboteurs was first established by the news agency niezależne.pl. Our journalists following this type of case know that there are websites where you can check this kind of thing. The name of the man who entered Poland on the same document was listed on American and Canadian websites showing Russian saboteurs who are carrying out similar actions in Ukraine during the war. This is Yevgeny Ivanov. He is a resident of Belgorod, Russia. In 2024, he was recruited by the Russian secret services. He allegedly coordinated an attempt to sabotage a Ukrainian drone factory. After analysing the Ukrainian media, we came across Yevgeny Ivanov. In July 2024, the court reporter described his activities on behalf of the Russian secret services. The first name and first letter of the surname matched the information provided by the prosecutor. His age also corresponded to the man we described. The sabotage operation at the drone factory was thwarted by the Ukrainian secret services. In May 2025, Ivanov was convicted by a court in Lviv. Journalists' findings also indicate that Ivanov's case officer was Yuri Sizov, a GRU officer. Conclusion? The Polish state and its services are aware of the enormous threat, but are unable to prevent it. What was before 2015 has returned. They are dismantling state institutions. They are leading the Polish state to ruin with their governing. Back in 2012, the current deputy head of the Internal Security Agency, responsible for counterintelligence, Colonel Krzysztof Dusha, participated in the famous drinking party with SSB agents. He has a job in Donald Tusk's office where he was supposed to deal with Russian influence. Apparently they produced a report which cost 3 million zloty. And the report is classified because, as I understand it, it is compromising. The incompetence, or some would argue malice, of government services under Tusk's government comes at the expense of the security not just of Poland, but of the entire European Union. Because if people who have been convicted of working for the Russian secret services can cross our Polish border without any problems and travel through our country without any problems, they can also travel through other countries, because we have the Schengen area. No one checks them, so this is really a very serious problem. European visa systems, the Schengen information system and the visa information system will only work if border countries such as Poland enter the data of foreigners entering Europe. The inspection carried out by Polish MP Andrzej Śliwka at the Ministry of National Defence did not go very well either. He wanted to check what projects would receive the 180 billion zloty from the SAFE programme, who would earn this money and how much of it would remain in Poland. There is no deputy minister present because it's Monday, and what's worse, the ministry doesn't know where this document is physically located, where this application for 180 billion zloty is. Unfortunately, those in power are afraid to answer these questions. Meanwhile, Russia is testing our reactions more and more broadly. On Friday, 4 Russian MiG-31 fighter jets flew towards the Polish border. They only changed course after 2 Patriot batteries were activated in Rzeszów, and NATO's air defense systems were put on high alert. Russian MiG jets and German Patriot air defense systems stationed in Poland took part in a standoff during a Kremlin provocation aimed at Poland. According to the German daily Bild, citing NATO sources, 4 Russian MiG-31s armed with hypersonic Kinzhal missiles flew over the Baltic Sea dangerously close to Polish airspace. The Polish military activated 2 Patriot systems at the airport in Rzeszów. This effectively scared off the aggressors, who returned to their base. The presence of MiG-31 aircraft near the Polish airspace is a fairly clear signal that the Russians are trying to intimidate NATO forces in Europe by showing that, despite various media reports, they still have the capacity to carry out airstrikes on NATO territory. The Russian provocation allegedly took place on Friday. The actions of the Russian Federation are openly provocative towards Ukraine, NATO and Poland. This is a hybrid war, so unfortunately we must be prepared for the worst. Because the Russian Federation has already shown its true intentions many times. For example, during the assault on the Polish border with Belarus using illegal migrants brought in from the Middle East and Lukashenko's agents, or the massive drone attack on Poland in September, the recent sabotage on the railway which almost led to mass casualties, and now the aggressive behavior of the Russian pilots over the Baltic Sea. Every Russian provocation, whether it is a plane crossing the border, a drone crossing the border, or a provocation such as the one that took place on the Polish railways, is a test by the Russian side of how resilient we are and how far the Russian side can go in generating chaos in Poland. And now it is crucial how firmly and decisively Poland responds. The latest activities of Russian-recruited saboteurs in Poland show the disturbing passivity of the services under the supervision of Donald Tusk's coalition government, and the threat is very serious. This is another element that needs to be seen in a broader context, that is, the scale of such activities, the scale of proxy agency activation, a certain bravado, the audacity with which the Russians are taking these actions against NATO countries, because it concerns not only Poland, but also Romania, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia. Yesterday, traffic at Vilnius airport was temporarily suspended after suspicious balloons appeared in the airspace near the airport. This is part of a whole series of hybrid attacks on airports in Europe, in Lithuania, the Czech Republic, and also in Germany, Belgium and Denmark. Of course, whether it is NATO or Poland as a country, they should have the ability to act more harshly towards the Russian Federation or its allies like Belarus, because in the East, only one language is understood, the language of force. According to the British Financial Times, the North Atlantic Alliance is considering taking much more aggressive hybrid operations against Russia, which uses its provocations in various ways. For example, during its regular Zapad maneuvers, it leaves some of its equipment close to its borders. This was the case before the attack on Ukraine, and the Kremlin is also gathering forces in the Kaliningrad region, which borders Poland. Hence NATO's firm decisions. NATO countries conduct regular intelligence and reconnaissance activities directed against Russia or in relation to what is happening in Belarus or Ukraine. We are talking here about flights, satellite activities and maritime activities. According to Politico, Brussels is even considering hybrid attacks against Russia. These include digital operations, conducting military maneuvers without prior announcement, and a coordinated response to Russian disinformation. Everything is to take place under the umbrella of NATO. NATO and NATO countries are unable to find a way to effectively deter Russia from acting against NATO countries, because today we are already facing a series of provocations aimed at NATO countries, which clearly shows that deterrence mechanisms are not working. Only coordinated action with the help of American troops stationed on the eastern flank of the alliance can deter the Kremlin's nefarious activities.
Donald Trump has confirmed he has spoken on the phone with Nicolás Maduro. Trump refused to disclose details, but the very fact the conversation occurred is cause for optimism, as he had previously described Nicolás Maduro and his government as international terrorists. A meeting on this matter will be held at the White House later today. Tensions had been rising for weeks, and last Saturday, Donald Trump posted the following message on his social media website Truth Social. To all airlines, drug dealers, and human traffickers, please consider the airspace above and surrounding Venezuela to be closed in its entirety. Thank you for your attention to this matter. When asked on board Air Force One, the president did not explain the reasons for his post and did not provide further details.
Mr. President, on Venezuela, can you tell us more about why the airspace above Venezuela should be considered closed?
Because we consider Venezuela to be not a very friendly country. They send millions of people, really, and probably a number in excess of that. And a lot of those people shouldn't be in our country, from jails
Does your warning,
and drugs.
Does your warning mean that an airstrike is imminent, or should we not read it that way?
Don't read anything into it.
The New York Times reported that you had a phone call with Maduro. Did you?
I don't want to comment on it. The answer is yes.
And can you tell us a little bit about it?
No, I can't do that.
Mr. President,
Would you say it went well?
I wouldn't say it went well or badly. It was a phone call, yeah.
According to the New York Times, the conversation discussed a potential meeting between the leaders in the U.S. Trump also reportedly said that if Maduro does not relinquish power, the U.S. will consider other options, including the use of force. The conversation took place a few days after the U.S. State Department designated Venezuela's Cartel of the Suns as a terrorist organization. Washington also accuses Maduro of leading the group. The leaders were also said to have discussed amnesty for Maduro and his associates. Caracas categorically denies these allegations and claims they are a pretext for a forceful change of power in Venezuela and a takeover of oil reserves. The United States currently has more than 14 warships and 15,000 troops deployed in the Caribbean region. The Venezuelan National Assembly wants to set up a special commission to investigate U.S. attacks on boats suspected of drug trafficking off the coast of Venezuela and in the eastern Pacific Ocean. We condemn as illegal, unlawful, and extrajudicial executions what has been happening in the Caribbean Sea since September 2nd. We have already reported this to the International Criminal Court. Venezuela has filed a complaint with the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, also known as OPEC, over attempts by the United States to seize its oil by military force. In his letter, Maduro stated that since August this year, U.S. President Donald Trump has been constantly harassing Venezuela and threatening it, which seriously jeopardizes regional and international peace, security, and stability. Later today, President Trump will hold a meeting at the White House on further action against Venezuela, officials said. Among those invited to the Oval Office are Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Dan Kane, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio.